Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me today for Friday Book Bites, and I am very excited to have a very special guest in Rachael Johns. Hi Rachael, thank you for joining me from Perth.
Hi Sandy, thanks so much for having me.
Welcome to Friday Book Bites. Today we're going to be talking about Uplit, and we'll talk about that in just a little moment. But before we do, I'd like to put up the details of the giveaway that I have going today. For anyone who leaves a comment or asks a question, whether that's during today's live stream or if you're watching this back later up until midday Saturday Sydney time, you will go into the running to win a copy of Rachael's brand new book, Flying the Nest. All right. So, Rachael, you write across rural romance, and a term that you coined yourself called life lit, or also known as uplit. And that's the one we're going to concentrate on today. Can you tell us what uplit actually is?
Sure. Well, I don't know if I coined it. It's actually a publicist that coined life lit when she was trying to work out how to describe my books, and then I somehow got attributed to it. So, and I don't know if uplit and life lit are slightly different. I think, life lit's not necessarily always as feel good and warm and fuzzy as uplit, but I like uplit because I think the majority of my books do have that kind of feel to them, though some are darker. I guess it's like we were looking a few years ago, women's fiction, which you've all heard about, is such a broad term. And, people will say to me, oh, what do you write? And when I say rural romance, they immediately kind of know what that is, even if they've never read a rural romance. But if I say women's fiction, I get this like, huh? And I guess life lit doesn't really even, that probably still gives you a huh. But I wanted to sort of narrow down a bit because women's fiction can encapsulate, historical fiction, domestic noir, the really book clubby type books and stuff. And it's just really hard. So I don't know. It was an aim to try and get easier description. I'm not sure it necessarily tells you as much, but it's kind of about books that are about contemporary books. I see life lit and uplit as being contemporary fiction that deals with sort of issues that we're all dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And I see it that whereas romantic fiction the focus is on a romance, there might be romance in elements in life lit or uplit, but the focus is more on the relationships, the other relationships people have in their lives. So like, relationships between friends, siblings, family, work colleagues. And so, it's still hard to describe, but I think it's kind of just contemporary fiction about real life issues.
Yeah. But that leaves you feeling uplifted at the end, and hence the uplit.
Yeah, I think so. Like, traditionally romance has to have a happy ending. Uplit might not be romantic happy ending, but it's usually a satisfying, hopeful ending for the characters. Not everyone's going to die off at the end or, evading each other. And I think it's really important. But this genre in the last few years has definitely seen an uplift. I don't know. and I mean, it's always been popular, I guess. But people, I think particularly in the last few years, this year particularly, where things are just very, very stressful, and so a lot of anxiety. People have a lot of anxiety. We don't really know what's coming next. Being able to escape into a book and just feel good. I think another term that I really like is feel good fiction. That just makes you go, it's not that it's not necessarily deep or about important things. I think that's a fallacy that a lot of people have with romance, with chick lit, with this type of women's fiction genre, is that, it's just light and fluffy. And I don't think it doesn't necessarily have to be light and fluffy to make you feel good. I think actually very few books are just light and fluffy. It's a misconception about romance that, they're only, just about a love story, and that also is stupid. I mean, what's more important than love in the but exactly. Not just romantic love, but feeling loved by people, get the world going round. But I think the misconception is that these books are about nothing and they're just easy and light and fluffy and stuff, but they can be feel good while also making people think, and while also exploring important contemporary issues that we're all dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Oh, have we frozen?
Okay. Yeah, we froze a little bit there.
Okay, I can hear you now. Yeah.
No. That's actually something I wanted to cover in this discussion, that, just because something leaves you feeling good at the end doesn't mean that there's not depth to the story. And that's something you have definitely done in all of your works of Uplit. You've covered some pretty intense themes and emotions. And I wanted to ask you, how do you find that balance when you know that you need to leave your readers feeling uplifted, but you are tackling some fairly, heavy themes? How do you find that balance?
That's a really good question. I think what I've worked out in hindsight, and sometimes when I'm not really I'm stuck in a book or in the initial planning stages, I'm thinking, oh, this is not quite right. I realise in my books I do need to have something that is really important to me, whether not necessarily an issue that I've experienced myself or it's important, but something maybe that I've heard people talking about, I'm interested to learn more about. I think it's something that, it's good to be brought to the forefront and discussed. But I also then need to I need to enjoy it. I need to have something light and fun. So say in my book, The Greatest Gift, it was about egg donation, which I knew nothing about when I first started writing that book, and when I met an egg donor who kind of inspired that. And it definitely, writing the book changed my thoughts around the whole issue. So that was, but it was a pretty serious, infertility and fertility treatment and, desperately wanting to be a parent and being unable to do those. They're very emotional, heavy issues that many people can relate to, but not exactly light and fluffy, feel good, through those traumas. So I like to balance it with something fun. So like in that book, I chose hot air ballooning, which, unless you've got a really big fear of heights, I challenge you to look at a hot air balloon in the sky or a few in the sky and not smile and feel, happy. Sorry about my dog. It's going on. So, I think that's what I kind of like to do. I kind of like to choose a topic, and it doesn't always happen when I first start writing a book. Sometimes it comes through. But say in the latest new one, it's about the breakup of a marriage, and that's pretty traumatic. But then there's a bit of fun in that the main character moves to a small town 1 week on, 1 week off, and kind of you meet characters from there who are really warm and help her kind of thing. And she, it's funny that I have a quiz night where everyone dresses up, crazily, and then there's a bit of a romance that gives the lightness to that book. So I think it's important to have, both light and dark. Well, I feel that's how I like to write,
Oh, absolutely. I think it's necessary, and it's something that you do so well. And in applying the nest, you've got Ashlyn and Adrian, who decide to do something called nest parenting. And this is not a term I had ever heard of until you started sharing with us probably last year on your social media feed some information about this book. How did you hear about nest parenting, and how much research did you have to do?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I was like you until a couple of years ago, never heard of it. And then I think I read an article, when I was faffing about on just procrastinating on another book. I was on Twitter and must have seen an article pop up, and it just, whatever the tagline or the headline was grabbed me. And I read it, and it was explaining that nest parenting is when a couple separate, and instead of the children, which traditionally happens, the children end up being shuffled between, one parent and the other. Instead of that happening, the parents end up moving out of the house. The children stay in the house, and the parents come and go and take turns in the primary house. And I remember thinking, oh, wow, this isn't something I hadn't heard of. And it makes so much sense in a lot of ways because, divorce and separation is so emotionally traumatic for everyone, but especially the kids involved who haven't really done anything to ask for it. And then they're suddenly having to shift their things every now and move them back and forth, get used to different places and all this sort of stuff. So I thought, oh, this is a great concept in theory for the children. But then I thought I thought there's got room for a lot of tension and drama and conflict in having to share a space with your ex-partner. Not exactly, they're not there all the time, but still, you're managing overall household bills. You're, clean the bathroom like you think they should, or it's bad enough, never mind when they're doing all these annoying things and you're not actually together. And then I thought, what happens when new partners come on the board? Are they allowed to be in the house that week? And the other interesting thing with nest parenting is I think it works very well if you're rather well, you've got a lot of money and you can keep the main primary house and you can both have your own separate residence as well.
Yep.
But from what I read, a lot of people, we wouldn't have the finances to do that, so we might have to, what other people do is share a second residence, like a smaller apartment or unit. So they share that with their ex-partner, 1 week on, 1 week off. So, you really would see, because that might be the time you would bring a partner when you haven't got your kids or whatever. So you're going to be sharing the house. So there's 2 bedrooms. But I just thought there's a lot of good in theory about this, but I figured it would be quite traumatic. Actually, it could be quite traumatic for the parents.
Yeah, and I was just thinking then, as you were saying that, if you're sharing the apartment on your off weeks, you're still constantly reminded of your ex, aren't you? Like you never.
Yeah, exactly. No, you've got their stuff there. You can't. It would feel a bit weird because it'd almost be like being in a hotel. I know, or a share, but you know that person, but you don't really want to know them anymore. I don't know. I think it would very much depend. From what you asked about research and from what I read and talked to a couple of people, it depends on the nature of the divorce and the breakup. Because if you're completely in that horrible toxic hating each other, I don't think it's the best for anyone. But the other thing I read a bit was that it can be a good temporary solution while everyone's kind of just learning to deal with being apart. The kids don't have to deal with that and moving back and forth, So some people said they did it just kind of when they first separated and while they were sorting out their finances and all that kind of stuff. And then they might be just staying with a friend or a family relative, on those off weeks or whatever. It's definitely, I think, more traumatic on the parents because you might be living out of a suitcase kind of 1 week. Yeah. But yeah, a lot of people are choosing to do it, I think, because we want the best for our children, don't we?
Well, and it's a hard thing to know what is the best thing to do in that situation because if the parent is stressed, that's obviously going to impact the children as well. I have no idea what I would do if I was ever in that situation at all.
No, I talked about it a bit with my husband initially when I was first looking at it, and we're like, oh yeah, I think we'd like this idea. But I think to me, I would only like it really if we could live in separate places on that 1 week that we weren't in the family home. So then the week you're in the family home or the 2 weeks you're in the family home, whatever you do, you're really 100% there and but then you've got your own space and your own time to go away and make your own sort of life without your partner as well. I feel like it would work much better if you had the finances to both have a separate place and there were 3 kind of dwellings in the equation.
Yeah, Jodie Gibson said it's an interesting concept, and like most things, the concept can be fantastic, but the reality isn't necessarily.
It's like books. You have a fabulous premise and a great concept idea, and you think, oh, this is going to be awesome, and then you get writing it, and the execution just doesn't quite pull off.
Yes, been there, done that.
I know.
Lynn has said that her pre-order arrived yesterday and she stayed up late last night reading it and she's very tired today. This is a sorry, not sorry moment, isn't it?
Yeah. I am sorry that you're tired today, but it's very nice to hear that you had to keep reading. I don't know how people do that. I'm very impressed too at your stamina because I get so tired. I read every night and then I'm sometimes only about 15 minutes. I'm determined I'm going to read for an hour. I'm so excited to get into the book and then I'm like falling off to sleep. So I always am impressed when people say they stayed up reading till like the early hours of the morning.
And if you can manage it, I can't function the next day. I'm far too old.
Yes, that's the other thing. Me too.
In my 20s, yes, now not so much. Lee has left a comment that she's reading Flying the Nest now and she's loving it. Nest parenting is an interesting concept to read about. And I think that's one of the things about the beauties of your books, Rachel. You've done it in Flying the Nest. You mentioned egg donation as well from one of your previous novels. These are topics that we don't necessarily talk about in our daily lives. I would never have had a conversation with my girlfriends about nest parenting. I've never had the cause to talk about egg donation and what we would do or any of those deeper things. And so I think it's really wonderful that in stories that reach such a wide audience because they are uplifting and people enjoy reading them, that we can have these discussions about some of these topics that maybe we wouldn't normally discuss.
Yes, I completely agree. And I think that's one of the things, again, misconception about commercial sort of feel-good fiction as opposed to literary type of fiction, people always think, you know, that's where the important, serious stuff can be discussed in it. But the thing is, a lot of people don't read that type of fiction, and it's not accessible for people. Whereas I think the books that you and I write and the ones that we often read and stuff are books that you don't need a dictionary to read. And I like that. I want to be able to, you know, think about in serious, important issues, but relax and enjoy a book and not feel like I'm, you know, being spoken down to, or that I am not intelligent enough to read it. And so I think commercial fiction reaches, as you said, such a wide range of people. And so that it's a place where, yeah, you can really explore important topics.
Yeah, and I think that one of the other misconceptions is that, you know, book clubs have to read literary books, whereas, you know, a book like Flying the Nest with these sorts of issues in it, that's going to be a huge source of discussion in a book club, I think.
About what you would do. I think you're so right. It's funny. I'm in a face-to-face book club as well as I've got an online book club, but the face-to-face one, you know, initially, I think we've been running about 5 years now. We'd all choose books that we think we should choose. Yeah. You know, and I made this terrible mistake of, and I think one of the things, like, there's some great literary fiction, don't worry, I like reading, you know, some of that. But I do prefer. It's less likely that I will enjoy that. But I always get sucked in by the blurbs or the you know, that won a prize or whatever, and then I think, oh, this one sounds really good, and so I'm the worst in our book club for choosing books like that I think are, you know, important ones that we should discuss. It's stupid. I'm such a slow learner, and then nobody likes them. So if we now choose books that, you know, we have murder mysteries and we have, you know, romances and we have women's, like, romantic elements, and we have uplit, you know, and we enjoy it and we have a lot of fun. And yeah, as you said, you can discuss anything.
Yeah, and I think that just goes to show that every genre has its place.
Yes, definitely.
You know, they're all important, and we need to explore them all. Now, you write, or you tend to write, one rural romance and one uplit a year. How on earth do you manage to do that, Rachel?
I actually don't know, and I'm feeling a bit crazy, I think, at the moment, because I'm on a deadline for the end of the year for a rural romance. It's supposed to come out at the end of next year, and I'm feeling, I even said to my mum this morning, I think I want to go back to one book a year. And I mean, I don't, so I always say, if people ask, well, it's that I don't do I do research, but it's not like a historical fiction where, you know, you have to kind of all the details of the time right and all that kind of stuff. And to me, my stories are more, even though they do explore, you know, some serious issues, like we said, it's more about the emotional side of those issues. So, and that's always going to be just that character's experience. So it's not necessarily everyone's experience that has been through whatever I'm dealing with. So I kind of just, I guess, dig deep in my own, how I would feel about this kind of situation and try and do that rather than, and then, you know, say with the egg donation, there is a bit about, you know, the legalities, but also the procedural stuff. But I don't go deep into that, so I don't have to do. So I think, yeah, I guess I go deep on emotion, not necessarily on technicalities and theory. And yeah, I don't actually know, and I think it's crazy, and I wish that I could that I would dedicate just one book a year, I think, in future years. So this year's 2. I'm hoping I'm back to 1, focusing on 1 next year. Because yeah, as you said, I mean, in some ways, as kids get older, it should get easier, I feel. But I don't know. Maybe I'm getting older too, and I'm not being able to, you know, keep the stamina as much. But I just feel, yeah. It's funny because I write reasonably fast when it's going well, but then, you know, we're all like that. I think, but then when you get stuck or something, I completely slow down, and then the stress of having 2 books a year really starts to, you know, overwhelm me. And I think, oh, if I was only writing 1, I could just take the day off and not stress. So yeah, I don't know. I'm crazy. That's the answer.
the short answer. Cheryl's left us a comment when we were talking about getting us to think about things that maybe we don't normally think about. And she said when she read Josephine Moon's The Gift of Life, it really made her think more about organ donation. And I remember going to a talk back when we were able to go to talks, when Josephine's book came out, and she was talking about the research she did into organ donation and the surprising things that she found out about it. It's not as easy as you die and they harvest your organs. And it was really surprising to me. And I'm always surprised how much research I have to do in my books. And I know you said you don't go too deeply into your research, but have you found anything that's really surprised you when you have gone into your research?
Well, actually, it's funny when you say that, because I think the thing surprising but also annoying. So I do more research when I realised, because I was thinking about organ donation then myself. I actually had a book a couple of years ago, Lost Without You, that dealt with organ donation too. A different one, it was quite different to I've read Josephine Moon's great book too, and hers was about a heart transplant, if I remember correctly. Golly, mama. And mine was a kid. But I remember, you know, before I started the research, I had an idea about where the book was going to go and what I wanted to happen. But then I spoke to someone who's the director of Kidney Donation Australia, and the actual process and what would happen would not match my book and the idea that so it didn't, the plot wasn't going to work. And that was very, very annoying, because I was far enough into the whole I'm going to write this book thing that I'm like, I need to make this work. And it worked on some levels, because it's about family and adoption, that book too, and not knowing, you know, and so needing a donation by a family member was fantastic. It kind of worked really well. But then I also wanted my character at that stage to die within 6 months, because when you talk about writing a book, you know, you need the urgency sometimes. And in that book, my one of the characters wanted to find her mother's wedding dress, and so that she could wear it for her mum. And I thought, I need her to have a sort of a time limit and urgency on doing this, because I thought, what if her mum's going to die, you know, or they think she'll die if she doesn't get a kidney transplant. And the doctor basically said to me, no. Well, they're not going to get a kidney transplant straight away after they're diagnosed anyway. There's going to be at least 6 months where they're going to be on dialysis and getting stabilised and all this sort of stuff. And then she said, and even though it's ideal to have a match that's tissue and organ, you know, the same as blood, the same as you, there are ways around it now. And then she told me about paired kidney donations and how you can register to find, if you and I want to donate our kidney to each other, and we're not a match, we can go and register to find so that you match with somebody else, you know. And I was like, no, that's I don't want to go there. That's too complicated. But at the same time, I had to go there. So I think, it definitely teaches you about things that you had. Like, I learned a lot more about organ donation through that than I ever thought I ever needed to know. But the thing I really hate about research sometimes, and I feel like writing contemporary fiction, I feel like we're at a disadvantage to say for people who are writing historical fiction, because we've had all so many medical advances now. There's laws to stop you doing, you know, certain things. Nothing is taboo. You can be gay. You can have a baby outside of marriage, you know, big whoop. Who cares? And so there's all these things that you could deal with in historical fiction. You know, people would die of something, or, you know, that they wouldn't die of now. Then social media, we have to deal with that too. Oh, you just track someone down on Facebook. You can stalk your ex-boyfriend. You know, it's not like you've spent 20 years not knowing what they were doing. So I feel like we're very much, it's getting harder and harder, I feel, to write contemporary fiction, because there's nothing that's, taboo, and everything can be fixed almost. I don't know.
Yeah. And the other thing is that people will know if we get it wrong. Whereas if I was writing about the French Revolution, there's not going to be anyone alive today that can question whether I've got that fact right or not, right?
Exactly. There might be like a tiny few historic professors or something, but they possibly won't even read the book. Exactly. And I remember that, and it's something that I've had to do in my work as well, you know, particularly if you're talking about, you know, medical things, you've got to get that right, because there's always going to be somebody that knows. And there's a very famous book in the women's fiction world that deals with paralysis, and the woman that I use to help me with a medical situation works in the spinal unit at Royal North Shore Hospital, and she had just read this other book, and she went, they got it wrong. And I was like, oh no.
There's always going to be someone who knows.
There is always going to be. I mean, you and I would probably I'd read that book and I would have no idea, but it depends what your area of expertise is, isn't it? Yeah. And so, yeah, there is always going to be, and I think we're never going to guarantee getting it right, but as long as we try and we do our best. And the other thing is things change so quickly. So unless you've got a date on your book, like it's 2018 or something, then, what was okay, what may not have been able to be cured 2 years ago. If you write a book 5 years' time, or you read that book in 5 years' time, now things have changed. So, yeah, I think hopefully the readers allow us a little bit of, what's the word?
Most readers do, I think. Yeah. Most readers go along for the ride. And Tracy's agreeing with you that advances happen so quickly these days. She's absolutely right. And Cheryl has mentioned that cellular memory, which was
that was fascinating.
Book, was something that she knew nothing about before reading that. And the same, I had no idea that kind of freaked me out a little bit, actually.
I know, it was really interesting, wasn't it? Yeah, I completely agree. One other thing that I found though, as I said, adoption. I did book on adoption, and that was even a bit with the egg donation and stuff. What one country, like in Australia, my book Greatest Gift works. Well, it did a couple of years ago. Again, it might not now because laws change and stuff regarding that sort of thing constantly. But it did not. It was not a book that would have worked if it was set in the US because their laws regarding it are different. So there's all those kind of things you've got to navigate as well. If you're setting a book elsewhere, you've got to make sure you check out where that is rather than yours. And like I had to work out when my book was set because I wanted closed adoption to be a thing. And so that made it tricky because it was too far in the past, So sometimes I said these advances are great in real life. Like obviously we want diseases to be cured. I think it's much better if people can find their birth parents if they want to. All these things, they're out in the open. But for fiction, it creates us issues, I tell you.
It does. It absolutely does. And Darlene, who is a nurse, has said that she noticed an error in a novel she was reading in terms of a stroke patient.
Yeah,
I know. It's a mind. Maybe we should just write historical, Rachel.
I think
so. Claudine's got a possibly curly question for you here, Rachel. It's a bit of a favourite child scenario here. Which do you like writing more, rural romance or the contemporary uplift?
I can answer this without a doubt easily. Right at this moment, I'm writing a rural romance and I much prefer contemporary women's fiction. A few months ago, I was writing contemporary women's fiction and I much preferred writing rural romance then. So it's a case of the grass is always greener. When I'm writing one, I think, the other's so much easier. You only have to focus on the hero and heroine. You don't have to worry about all these other little things. And then when I'm writing rural romance, I'm like, oh my goodness, I just, you've got to make sure the chemistry and the connection's all right and that they're on the page together frequently. I don't know, they're just nothing. I think the thing is, when we're talking about literary fiction versus commercial fiction, historical versus contemporary, nothing is easy. I love the quote. I got it, it's up on my board over there. It's from, I can't quite read, but I bought it from the New York Library a few years ago, and it says something like, easy reading is not easy writing. And I think that is true. Like there's nothing, everything has its challenges. Nothing is easy, sadly. It would be so much, I had a stress-free life if it was easy to write books. It would just be, wonderful. But it's wonderful a lot of the time, but a lot of the time it's really, really hard. And I think to me, it always seems a thing I'm not doing, but it would be easier. And of course, I'm going to like the thing that's easier.
I know. I mean, we were joking when we talked about maybe we should write historical fiction. I can't imagine the amount of research that we have to go into. There's no way I could ever do that.
Same. But, we can say that. We can dream.
Alrighty. I'm very conscious of the time, Rachel, so I'm just going to pop up your contact details so that people can find you online if they would like to. And these covers are just a sample of the 3 million books that you have written over the years. I just took a sample of those because I would have 4 or 5 screenshots if I put them all up. if anyone's got any last-minute questions, pop them in now and we'll get Rachel to answer them. Claudine is saying that it's very funny that you like the one that you're not doing at the moment.
Yeah.
What's next for you, Rachel?
What's next? Well, in May next year, I've got a book out called How to Mend a Broken Heart. That is a semi-linked book. I'm not going to say sequel because it's not sequel in this, strictest form, but it's linked to Art of Keeping Secrets, which I wrote a few years ago, which was about 3 women who had many secrets, but 2 of them I felt like it kind of was finished. But so many people kept asking me for a sequel and a follow-on. So I took the one character who I didn't think her life was quite finished, and it's her story, but because it's women's fiction, I like doing often multiple point of views, or I haven't for the last couple of books. I've got her daughter's story in there as well, and it's about both of them kind of learning to move on after major upheavals in their lives. So it is linked to Art of Keeping Secrets for those people who are desperate to find out what happened to Flick after the book, but it's also completely standalone. And at the moment I'm writing or trying to write a rural romance that's supposed to have a Christmas theme, but I don't know, maybe I'm not feeling very festive this year. It's hard to follow.
Maybe put up your tree and that might inspire you.
What's that, sorry?
Put up your tree and that might inspire you.
Look what I've got on my desk.
You found a pink one.
I found Tess Woods, the writer Tess Woods. I said, I need a Christmas tree on my desk. And honestly, she knows everything. She's like, this is about 2 months ago when I first was thinking about starting. She's like, Typo has them online. So, yeah.
All right, just a few last comments, and there's one question there that I can see that's come through. Tracy said, please know that we readers appreciate all of the hard work and the research. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you, Tracy. And I think I can speak for Sandy too to say that we writers really appreciate, especially readers like you who are, really supportive and encouraging and share things on social media, because, there's nothing like getting a message when you're feeling, you just can't do it and you don't think, how did you ever write books before? Because it feels like you're not going to be able to, I don't know if you get that, Sandy, but I feel that. And then you're suddenly, for some reason, a message always turns up at the right moment.
The right time.
And so, yeah, we really, really appreciate readers too.
Yeah. Kim is saying that you are a wonderful reader. Writer. And Yvonne has said that she's glad that the reading is easy. That's good to know.
Me too. Except the problem is a lot of the time I'd much rather be reading than writing because
I'm the same. Claudine is very excited about having a companion story for Flick.
Make sure you get an
Nola loves the pink Christmas tree. Now, Cheryl's asked a question. Tracy has answered it, but we'll give you a chance to answer it too, Rachel. Okay. Cheryl hasn't read any of your books yet, and she wants to know where to start. Tracy has suggested start with the current one, The Flying Nest. Have you got any suggestions for Cheryl where she should start?
I would say, what is your favourite thing to read? Because I do write in sort of 2, not hugely different streams, but if you really like romance and you like the country settings and those kinds of stories, then I would say I'd start with one of my rural romances. My favourite is Mandrout. It's a standalone, so it's not a part of the series. It was the most fun to write. But any of the more recent ones too, Talk of the Town, and then you could read the follow-on. But if you prefer more relationships that aren't romance, but about between the Patterson Girls was one of my was my first one. It's really hard to do. That's about 4 sisters and a family curse. It's hard to choose. It's like choosing your favorite child, but it's difficult. I'm terrible. I never seem to like the most recent book it takes me a few years to. So I really appreciate Tracy saying Flying the Nest, but I'm terrified to recommend that one.
Oh dear. Thank you so much for your time today, Rachel. And Helen is saying thank you, that she loves your work. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and I'm so pleased that you had the time to do that with me. Good luck with the writing, and hopefully that pink Christmas tree will inspire you.
You too. I hope whatever you're up to, it's going well.
I've just handed in my manuscript for next year.
I'm so jealous.
So, yeah, but I'm in that moment where I'm now waiting to hear back to see how terrible
all hell, isn't it?
So that's, an awful lot of chocolate has been consumed this week, I can tell you that.
Well, I hope you don't have to wait too long.
I know. I hate the waiting. The waiting is the worst. So thank you very much for joining me. I will see everyone again next week, and I have my first international guest next week. So I'm very excited about that. Ooh, I know, very big mystery. So thank you again, Rachel, and have a lovely weekend, everybody.
Thank you so much. See you later.
See you.